Foreign policy, as a rule of thumb, must not only be desirable, it must be doable. And the idea that Ukraine militarily is going to be in a position to push Russia back and out of Crimea, out of all the regions of the East, however desirable many might see that, is simply, as you put it, not in the cards. Russia simply has too much weight and mass to bring to the battle. That said, I don't think Ukraine should ever give up its legal claims to its territory. It's an important principle. It's rightfully theirs. So what I'm suggesting is essentially a ceasefire in place. Russia can keep its dreams about incorporating Ukraine. Ukraine can keep its hopes to reclaim all its territory. But I think after 3 years of carnage, it's time for this war to end. I actually think Ukraine has done extraordinarily well. If we'd had this conversation 3 years ago, I don't think too many would have thought Ukraine could have held out as well as it's done. Essentially, the battlefield is not much different today than it was 3 years ago when this phase of the war began with the Russian invasion. So some kind of a ceasefire in place, I think, is a useful idea. It's not peace, I get it, but it's better than what we have. What I think it will take, though, more than anything, is Russia, Mr. Putin, to be persuaded that time is not on his side. He believes that the difference in strength between Russia and Ukraine will allow Russia to prevail, particularly if the United States and the West grow short of breath in supporting Ukraine. So I believe we have two diplomatic tasks, and by we in this case, really, I mean the United States and the Trump administration. One is to persuade Ukraine to settle for some type of a ceasefire in place. I think they are, so long as they get some of the security assurances they need. And then to persuade Vladimir Putin that more war will not give him more territory, much less the political control he wants. I can't sit here with 100% confidence and say that's what the administration will do, but I think there's a pretty good chance, despite some of the things that were said during the campaign. If one listens to what Donald Trump has said in the last couple of days, some of his warnings to Vladimir Putin, if one listens to Keith Kellogg, the retired general who's been named the special envoy for Ukraine and Russia, I think there's actually a pretty good chance that this administration knows it's not in the U.S. interest to abandon Ukraine. And so long as Ukraine is prepared to accept a compromise, if you will, then I think this administration is prepared to lean on Russia to also accept a compromise.
And what leverage does the U.S. and its allies have over Russia? These sanctions don't seem to have quite as biting as people had hoped.
Fair enough, you're right. And it's, we tend to, I think, overuse sanctions as an instrument of foreign policy. We use them too often. And my own sense is we expect too much of them. That said, one can keep the sanctions in place. One can look for some select new sanctions. Mr. Trump has talked about tariffs. I think, though, the principal leverage comes from two things. One is if we make long-term military pledges to Ukraine, it takes away from Mr. Putin the confidence that time works in his favor. Ukraine has essentially fought Russia to close to a draw. If we provide Ukraine a commitment to provide them with significant munitions and equipment for years to come and take off some of the constraints, it seems to me Mr. Putin's confidence begins to get weaker. Second of all, the Russian economy, as you all know, is not in great shape. And so I don't think Mr. Putin has unlimited time to prosecute the war. He has real manpower shortages. The economy is not in good shape. The fact that he took North Korea in tells me something about his weakness. And I think it also a priority for the Trump administration needs to be to lean on China to become less of a supporter of Russia. That said, I think the complete isolation of Russia is not going to happen. China's there, North Korea's there. Just the other day, about a week ago, Jay, I think it was actually a week ago today, the president of Iran visited Russia and signed a new cooperation agreement with them. So I think we have to assume that in this world we now live in, the United States cannot totally isolate anyone, no matter how bad an actor we see them. So we have to assume that Russia can continue. But where I think we can affect Russian calculations is by signaling that Ukraine is not going to grow weaker over time.